Sunday, October 30th. At the end of the last vlog, I got myself into a writing loop. It happens, you know, when you start thinking too much, and I could not figure out the order for scenes 11, 12, and 13. I was second guessing myself. I felt like I was doing it all wrong, and I was like, maybe it needs to be different scenes. So this weekend, I actually sat down with the novel, and I was like, okay, we just need to figure this out. And I definitely was just overthinking because I ended up putting the scenes back the way that I had them before. So nothing has changed. The same scenes that were scenes 11, 12, and 13 are still scenes 11, 12, and 13. Who knows what happened to my brain last time? It just had a little meltdown, which is fine. So I fleshed out this weekend. I fleshed out scene 11. The scene, as it currently stands, ends kind of abruptly because everything that I felt needs to happen in the scene happens, and then it just kind of ends. And I was like, maybe something else should happen in the scene, but I didn't want to add just like random extraneous stuff just to make the scene like last longer. You know, maybe in future drafts that will happen, but for now, scene 11 is just kind of like, you know, abruptly ended, which is fine. And then, you'll never believe it, but I also, connected scene 11 to scene 12, therefore finished Act 1. Took me 5 months to work through Act 1, and then I finished it off camera. I mean, what an anticlimactic finale to Act 1. But it is what it is. So the connective tissue between scene 11 and scene 12 is the first time I at least remember intentionally writing, like, just a telly blob to make the time pass. Because I feel like time's gotta be passing, and I wasn't sure how else to connect the scenes, because scene 12 happened a little bit later in the time span than scene 11, but, like, nothing important was happening between them, so all it needed to do was just, like, pass the time. So that's what I wrote. It's just a little telly blob, you know, connecting scene 11 and scene 12 at the moment. It's not very long, it's just, you know, and then time passes, and then scene 12 begins. I have not yet started reading through scene 12, which is what I'm going to start with. I am imagining a significant amount of scene 12 is going to need to be rewritten, because when I originally wrote it in the first draft, all the players in the scene didn't really have fully developed personalities yet. They were just like, kind of like stand-ins for the characters that were going to be there, so I'm gonna have to straighten all that up and, you know, see what needs to be going on. I don't know how much of a mess scene 12 is going to be. I remember when I was writing it, I remember putting in, like, placeholder people and just being like, you know, this is happening somewhat, I'll fix it later. So I don't need to fix it all now, but I need to at least bring it up to the standard of the rest of Draft 2. So that's what I'm going to begin doing today. I'm now officially working on Act 2 of Draft 2. Sorry, it was all off camera. I mean, nothing even was there to film, because I sat down and I was like, I gotta figure out the scene order, something's terribly wrong. And then, pretty quickly, I was like, oh, nothing is wrong, I was just overthinking, and the scenes are fine where they were before. So, there was nothing to vlog for that. And then, scene 11 was mostly fleshed out. I mean, like, I sat around thinking, like, what else could I be adding to this scene? And then I was like, I want to add extra stuff, so I'm just gonna end it. Nothing to vlog for that. And then, to connect the scenes, it's just a little tiny paragraph of telling, you know, to make the time pass. There was nothing to vlog. The world's most anticlimactic finale to, Act 1. Sorry about that, that's just the way it goes, I suppose. So now, we shall begin Act 2 with scene 12. Also, when I was writing the first draft, I felt, like, pretty good, at least equally good between writing Act 1 and Act 2. Act 3 is where everything falls apart. So Act 3 is like chaos, you know, danger zone of badness, but I'm not going to worry about that now because that's like way in the future. Who knows how long it's going to take me to do Act 2? It took me 5 months to do Act 1. So hopefully Act 1 goes as smoothly as Act 2. No, hopefully Act 2 goes as smoothly as Act 1, because I don't remember it having the big collapse that Act 3 had, where just the whole novel just completely fell apart. So, you know, there's that to look forward to in the far, far future. When I'm working on Act 3, everything will be a disaster. But at the moment, everything's fine. I'm still just planning on pulling scenes from Draft 1, putting them into my document for Draft 2, and, you know, fleshing them out, connecting them, doing all the things I've been doing for Act 1, now in Act 2. So that's where we are. actually decided to add a little moment of scene into my telly blob of time passage. So I just added 193 words of like a quick dialogue moment, a tiny little something to add to that telly blob of time passing. Because it just looked wrong. I mean, I don't know how to make time pass. But for now, at least, there's 193 words of a quick dialogue between some of the characters before the connective tissue ends and scene 12 begins. That's what I decided to do. So now I'm officially going to begin reading through scene 12 to see how much of a disaster it is and how much work it might need in the coming days. So I just read through scene 12. There was only one character in it that is not yet been introduced in draft 2, so I removed her. I'm not yet sure what, I've been encountering her in these various scenes, and I'm not sure about her character yet, so at the moment she has not been introduced, so I removed her from the scene. There are also parts of the scene where they're referencing things that I think they have now learned previously in the story, so they don't need to be learning them again, which will require me to go back through and read other parts of the story in Act 1 that I have now written again for Draft 2, just to see what knowledge they have so that I can, clear up the knowledge gaps, because right now, in Scene 12, they are asking about things and, trying to learn things that I think they actually already know, which means I can cut all of that. I don't know, and Scene 12 seems to have significant portions of it that are yet to be written, that things that still need to happen within the scene, so I don't know, first pass though, not too bad. There are parts of it where the dialogue is so clunky and telly and exposition-y, but that can be fixed in future drafts. I'm not really worried about that now. So all I had to do was remove that one character, and my next step will have to be figuring out what they know and what they don't know, so that it's not a bunch of repeated information. But I'm really looking forward to it, but yeah, that's next. Today is the next day, Tuesday, October 31st. It's Halloween. And so far today, I have read through earlier points of the novel to try to fill in some knowledge gaps, to see what they know in the future. And I took some notes. I was able to mark in scene 12, they know this, they don't know this. And stuff that they already knew that they were asking about in scene 12, I could delete because there's no reason for them to learn it twice. The problem I ran into was, up in scene 4, or whatever scene I was reading, where they were learning this knowledge now in draft 2, where they hadn't known it yet in draft 1. They learned some stuff in scene 4, but they also just magically know stuff, which is unfortunate, which means at some future distant time, I'm gonna have a whole draft about, knowledge gaps and, when they learn stuff, and what they know versus what they don't know at different points in the story. You know what I mean? So, I don't know, I got kind of a little bit overwhelmed, I think, because in scene 4, you don't even know if it's actually scene 4, but whatever earlier scene I was reading, some of the stuff they learn that they know in scene 12, but some of the stuff they just magically knew. And then I was like, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? And so I wrote a whole bunch of notes in the margins about what they know and what they don't know, and what they learned and what they just magically know, and that will need to be fixed. So I don't think, when I return now to scene 12 after cutting what they have already learned that they don't need to learn again, I don't think I'm going to spend time right now focusing on fixing the knowledge gaps in scene 12, because I know I'm just going to have to do literally a whole draft in the future about knowledge gaps and when they learn certain things. Because I think that might be a much bigger task than I was originally thinking, so I might just leave it with the notes in the margins that say literally they need to learn this, they already know this, when have they learned this, they just magically know it. I might just leave that for now and not worry about the knowledge gaps, because draft 2 is really just about fleshing out scenes and connecting them. I can have a future draft for knowledge gaps. Might not even be draft 3, I don't know. But I really don't think it's going to be draft 2 because otherwise I might just get too overwhelmed. So what I'm going to do now is go back through, read through scene 12, and then also look at my notes that I'd written about scene 12 to see the parts that still need to be written, because I know there are still things that need to happen in scene 12 that have not yet been written. So I'll write that, flesh out scene 12, and then hopefully begin the connective tissue for scene 13. Just knowing, you know, and I feel fine just having notes in the margins that are like, fix this later about the knowledge gaps, because I feel like if I go in now and start trying to fix the knowledge gaps, I'm just going to be massively overwhelmed. I'm going to have to be looking at every scene again, and it'll start feeling like a whole new draft, and I'm just not ready for that because I have not even finished draft 2. So for now, that's what I'm going to do. Just going to leave the knowledge gaps. Hopefully I won't feel too overwhelmed by it, and I'll actually be able to just leave the knowledge gaps and then write out the rest of scene 12 and continue on that way. That seems like the most productive use of my time. Could be the wrong choice, but that's what I'm going to do. So it is the next day, November 1st. It is brisk out there. I don't remember a time where it ever snowed so much during, like, Halloween trick-or-treating time. Last night, like, half the trick-or-treaters that would come to the door, instead of saying trick-or-treat, they would say Merry Christmas. Because it was so cold, and like a blizzard. But I briefly flipped through some of my notes that I had taken, you know, many a moons ago for scene 12. But the problem with my note-taking is I have a slight organizational issue. So like, you could take a pile of notes and put it through a paper shredder, and those notes would be more organized than the notes that I take. It's a problem, and it's a problem I have never corrected. So like, usually in between various drafts, I'll have periods of time where I like get a little bit stuck, and I'll go through and I'll try to read all my notes. But I take them everywhere. I take them in the middle of paragraphs in the story, I take them in the margins, I take them any place you can imagine in the document, I take them on my phone in like 15 different separate notes, I take them on paper, I take them in my head and then forget to put them anywhere. It's a problem. I mean, it's like actually a problem. But rather than getting overwhelmed, I am just going to write what I know scene 12 needs in order to bridge into scene 13, because the main thing that I remember needing to add to scene 12 came after I had already written the first draft. Like, I later developed what that scene needed in order to bridge, you know, into scene 13. Not connective tissue, but like the event that needed to happen in scene 12. So I'm gonna write that, and then I'm just not gonna worry about anything else that needed to be added to scene 12 because I don't want to get overwhelmed, and that will allow me to continue on with this draft peacefully. And then at some future point, once I'm finished with draft 2 and I'm going through the odious task of collecting and reading through all of my notes, I'll see if I come across anything else that I needed to add to scene 12, and I'll just add it, because right now, you know, the note sorting and reading just, it doesn't appeal to me, and I don't need it to finish draft 2, because all draft 2 is fleshing out and connecting scenes. So, that's what I'm gonna do. Alright, so I have encountered a problem. This always seems to happen. I have, like, approaching the natural conclusion for a section of the novel where I could naturally end the vlog, and then I hit a problem. So, here's the snag. The portion of scene 12 that I know needs to be added in order for it to naturally connect to scene 13, A, has to do with one of the knowledge gaps, and B, it has to do with, like, the very specific backstory of one of the characters, which I have not fully fleshed out yet. That was why I had left it blank and unwritten during the first draft, because I hadn't really figured out yet this very specific piece of backstory. So in order for me to finish scene 12, I'm going to have to spend some time developing the backstory in order for me to put it into this scene in a logical way that makes it connect to scene 13. Which means I don't think I'll be able to do it in this vlog, because this vlog is supposed to go up in, like, you know, less than 12 hours. So, is it a disappointment to always end these on a cliffhanger, or is it enjoyable? I don't know. But join me next week, and I will have hopefully written or be writing the end of scene 12. I'll have hopefully developed the backstory. That's what matters, right? It will happen. I just don't think it's going to happen today because brainstorming takes time, and I'm on a bit of a time crunch right now. So I'll see you next time. Please come back.